ministry in?
Yes, last weekend I was up to Michigan, Lockport, Michigan. And so I covered that. Then I went down and spent a couple of days with my oldest brother. Here comes Patricia Curlin.
And there's Monica Marie. Welcome, Monica Marie and Patricia.
Yep, we don't have Monica Marie. I talked with Joe Torma not too long ago, and he said he feels he's ready to go.
Good. And he's going to be doing the seminars for that series for you in the spring, huh?
Yeah, we've got that, and we've got a another one on Catholic social teaching with Joe Holland.
Oh,
and their success, they succeed. So Joe is in February, and then Joe Holland is February, and then Joe Torma picks up in March, and he's going for 7 weeks. So we have basically an 11-week, and these guys know their stuff.
oh, they do.
Yeah.
Joel, both of them will be great.
Yeah.
I would just say hello. I'm going to step away. I'm just in between meetings, and I know I'm a little early, but Father John, I met you at Notre Dame with Sister Fran Ferger doing your sexual self years ago.
All right.
So it's great to see you again.
It's good to see you. You are at the Summer Institute.
Yes, I miss
What?
those. I miss those. They were just such great opportunities to grow as a lay woman and spiritual director and mother. And so now the OSP has so many fabulous ways for me to grow in this particular time. I just got off my spiritual direction supervision meeting.
Uh-huh.
And Father Bob, you'll appreciate this because the director that was presenting a case, and he's such a great, wonderful guy, former Franciscan in his early young adult life. Then he married for 35 years and is widowed. And so the case that he was presenting to our peer group was about racism.
Ah,
And I've just finished with this OSP group, just a big appreciation for the anti-racism working group that I'm part of, and the white fragility and the caste study. And I immediately sent him off the link to the new studies. So, I just love OSP, and I just love Father Frank Eckhart, who's my dear friend, who got Dick and I into it. So I look forward to this presentation. I'm going to step away for a minute, but just great to see you all. And I look forward to hearing this expert, you, maybe
well,
about
thank
this
you for
topic.
being here. Thank you for being
Okay,
here,
I'll be
Patricia.
back.
Okay, sure. Somebody else is here that is muted.
Yes, and that's Joe Torma. Joe, you need to
hi.
unmute yourself and change your name if you would. So we have more than the owner. Owner of what?
There he is. Hi, Joe.
Hey,
This is
John. John,
Nice
do you
to
go
see
by John or Jack? Because you.
John, my dad was Jack. I'm
Oh,
John.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to see you.
You too. Thanks for doing this.
And,
Bob, what do you say about changing his name?
Yeah, your name, Joe, is owner. And I thought it was a bartender that was signing in. So you know how to put your name in up in the upper right corner of your picture?
No.
You should be able to, let me see where it would be. You don't get a little 3 dots up in your upper right corner?
I don't have anything up above that I can see. My wife is my techie and she's helping me out here.
Yeah, you have to move your cursor up to the right-hand corner, upper right corner, and a mute button.
Yeah, she's coming over to look at it because otherwise she was on my other side.
Yeah, and good. Thank you, Mrs. Torma, for all the help you're giving.
You're very welcome. Rename, right?
Yes.
Okay, type your name there.
Well, I should capital.
Yep.
It's there now?
But no, you have
Oh,
to
not
do
yet.
Rename.
There.
No, it's there.
Hey.
Yay.
We know who
Thank-
the owner of this operation is.
Thank you, Mrs. Torma.
You're welcome. I will be standing by.
Yes, I'm having
Okay.
her standing by to help me out here. We went through the whole thing, so I think I know what to do, except that there's all these little pieces all over the place that
Well,
I don't
no problem,
necessarily
Joe.
remember. Huh?
What can you tell me about how the order is that you and Catherine are going to be doing?
Well, I'm just doing, oh, the Sister Catherine, yeah. Well, I'm just going to start,
All right,
and she doesn't want to do any of the history or anything. She just wants to talk about the Akron Catholic Worker.
okay,
So I have a slideshow. I have a
Great.
PowerPoint.
great.
I'm going to go through the briefly because we don't have that. I don't have that much time.
Sure.
What, about 25 minutes? So
Sure.
I'm going to go through the history of the Catholic Worker, integrate in the theology, and then show how their activities implement the theology of the church. And then I'm going to, excuse me, back up a little bit and talk, because you asked me to talk
Sure.
about my involvement in the Catholic Worker.
Right.
I don't have any slides for the Rochester Catholic Workers, so that's where I started in 1975 for 8 years. So I'm just going to talk about that for a little while. And then I have a few slides on my contemporary situation of the Alliance Catholic Worker.
That's great. That sounds terrific. And then
then
I'll just
she's
have
gonna pick up.
Catherine pick up when you leave off.
Right,
All right.
and
That's-
about 25 minutes, is that what you said you
Well,
wanted?
we
to
have
do?
35 minutes. Yeah,
For me?
30 to 35 minutes for the two of you.
Well, for the two of us, right.
Right.
So how many for me? 20?
Yeah, if you can do 20, it depends. It sounds like Sister Catherine isn't going to have as much. I don't
No,
know.
I don't think so.
So if you did 20 minutes and she did 15, we'd be fine.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm covering so much more than she is.
Well, if you want to do a little bit more, Joe, don't worry about it. If you go
Okay.
25 minutes,
But I'll be aware. I've done presentations before and I'm used to more, and I've taught all the time. So
Sure.
I'm more or less aware of the time. So once I have a general idea, I can speed it up,
Sure.
or something like that. Yeah.
Sure, you'll do fine. I have no problem. Welcome, Monica Marie Kaiser.
Hello.
Nice to
I
have
just
you
now
here.
discovered I didn't have my camera on.
Oh,
I've been listening to you guys chat about technology and such.
oh, okay.
I'm very
Yes,
excited about this.
Glad you can be here. I saw
Oh,
Jim
Jo-
Beer
John,
pop
just-
up there.
John, just to let you know, and you and Bob, I don't know what people are going to ask after we're done. I anticipated that they might want to know about more material about the Catholic Worker. I have an extensive library, so I put a whole bunch of books in front of me here. So if somebody says, for example, what about some books about the Catholic Worker in general? Well, I can show them Loaves and Fishes. I can show them A Harsh and Dreadful Love. In other words, I can
Sure.
show them these things. The Catholic Worker movement by the Zwicks, from that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, and so that's the Catholic Worker. And then I move to Dorothy Day, and I have a packet. Just show you. No, this one. Yeah, I have 3 or 4 of these. Of
Thank you, Bob. And good afternoon, everybody, and
Good
welcome. This webinar is sponsored by the Gospel Nonviolence Working Group on behalf of the Association of United States Catholic Priests. I'm especially happy to welcome those of you who might be joining us today for the first time. I'm John Hegel. This webinar is entitled Revolution of the Heart, the life and witness of Dorothy Day on the 40th anniversary of her death. Dorothy Day once said that the greatest challenge of the day is how to bring about a revolution of the heart. Revolution which has to start with each one of us. Think of that for a moment. A revolution of the heart. If this was a crucial call to personal and communal transformation for Dorothy and her life and in her Catholic worker movement, I think it certainly is just as urgent for us today. Our presenters today are Joseph Torma and Catherine Walsh, and they have been living that revolution of the heart. Today, they will invite us to continue to be part of this ongoing challenge of the Catholic worker movement. Joe and Catherine will share their stories for about 35 to 40 minutes, the two of them together, and then you will be invited to interact with them. Before I introduce our speakers, let's just take a moment to have a quiet prayer. For a moment, I'd like to invite each of us to think of our own lives and our own hearts as Catholic worker houses. And welcome to your hearts, to your Catholic worker home, your loved ones, all those who care for you, all those you care for, the people in your city, those who are struggling and hurting and ill, people who are suffering from the COVID pandemic, those who have died from the pandemic and whose lives and loved ones are grieving. Welcome into your home also our nation in its wounded state, going through this time of uncertainty and transition. Welcome into your heart and into your own Catholic worker hospitality, the world. For a moment, just make yourself aware of all these people that we are bringing with us into this webinar today. Thank you. So let me introduce Joseph and Catherine. Joseph Torma coordinates the Alliance Ohio Catholic Worker after he retired from 37 years of teaching theology at Walsh University, Ohio, where he specialized in justice and peace studies. It's interesting that Joe's commitment to Catholic social teaching began early in his college years and during his doctoral studies at the University of Ottawa. During a time when lay leadership was only beginning to be recognized, Joe's vision and commitment found active expression in several different places, including his ministry at St. Bernard's Seminary in Rochester, New York, where he was also involved in the Rochester Catholic Worker. He has written several books and articles on social justice, and he continues to give presentations on social justice, Dorothy Day, and the Catholic worker movement. And Sister Catherine Walsh. Sister Catherine co-founded the Akron Catholic Worker House in Akron, Ohio, where she has lived as a live-in volunteer for over 25 years. Catherine was born in County Mayo, Ireland, and moved to Cleveland, Ohio in 1957. In 1959, she joined the Sisters of Charity of St. Augustine, and her ministry has been very rich and varied, including childcare, primary education, pastoral ministry. And during the late 1980s and 1990s, now get this, Catherine served with the Cleveland mission team in El Salvador, both before and during their brutal civil war. And then after returning to Cleveland, she has continued to minister to recent Hispanic immigrants. So we welcome both Joseph and Sister Catherine. And Joseph will begin, and then when he's finished, Sister Catherine, you just unmute and start your own presentation. Thank you. Joseph? Joseph, you can begin.
Yeah, I'm just getting my slideshow up.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
Okay. Um, I regret that I have only 20 some minutes, which means I'm going to be briefer than I would like, maybe even briefer than is useful. But nevertheless, I want to cast a wide net over the history and the theology of Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker, and include briefly my own experience, okay? So what I'd like to do is start with the event that happened 5 years ago that probably increased the visibility of Dorothy Day in the United States by, I would guess, 100 times. And that was, it's not moving. I'm trying to, my slideshow isn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, there you go. Now, how do I do that?
Just go ahead.
Okay, and that is Pope Francis. When he came to the United States, the first Pope to talk to Congress, explicitly mentioned the Dorothy Day. And I think you can read it there. I don't have to read it because I gotta keep moving, but I think that raised the consciousness up so that at least people asked me, who is this? I thought there was only Doris Day. And so then I tried to explain about Dorothy Day. So this has been a very slow process of raising consciousness, but I thank the Pope so much for having introduced Dorothy Day as the most significant Catholic, along with Thomas Merton, in his opinion, in the United States. Again, I could go briefly. She was born in 1897, and then you can see that she died in 1980, and the very significant thing for her death date, it was Saturday night in 1980, 40 years ago. And that Saturday night was the last day of the church year. If anybody knows anything about Dorothy Day, her whole life was in flow, fluctuated with the church year. And I think it's highly appropriate that she ended the church year, and began her new church year with the Lord on December 29th, 1980. She was 83 years old. She was born in New York. Her father, as you can see there, John Day, was a journalist, but his basic job was as a sports reporter, as a horse racing reporter. And she had 2 brothers and a younger sister. And they started in New York. He got a nice job in San Francisco with the track in San Francisco. But shortly after they got there, this San Francisco earthquake chased them out. He lost his job. He went to Chicago looking for work there. Didn't have much work. They started to, in a sense, be poor. And so her first experience of the poor was when she would take her little sister, because she was 15 years older than her youngest sister, and take her around the neighborhood to all the different places where people were poor. And she kept wondering why people were so poor. And she also, around that time, ran into people who practiced their religion. Her family was not overtly religious, but an Episcopal priest came and asked the parents if the kids could go to the Episcopal church and be baptized in the Episcopal church. So they were. So she had this initial experience of the poor and religion when she was in Chicago. Next. And then the next aspect of her life was when she went to the University of Illinois. And she became aware of socialist literature. She was very inclined to literature, so Sinclair Lewis and Jack London and those kind of folks. She didn't stay too long because she took her journalistic abilities to New York and started to work for the for the socialist papers, The Call and The Masses. And during that time, she became an activist. She was working with the suffragettes. And it's an interesting story because that was her first experience of protest, her first experience of being arrested. And she never voted in her life. She decided that that was too much of an affirmation of the institution, but she in fact did start out her active social life, action life, as a vote for going for women's suffrage. She was sort of a libertine. She liked to go to bars. She had literary friends. She had a couple of marriages, had an abortion. But eventually she settled on a man, he's in the middle there, Forster Batterham, who was an atheistic biologist who really loved her, and they had a child together. But she had been so feeling the need for something that was transcended just the involvement in social concerns, because she was basically writing about social activities at that time. And so she felt the need to get something that underpinned her social activity and that didn't just rely on the commitments of the people around her. So she decided to get baptized, and Forster couldn't take that. He left her. She always loved him, had regular communications with him. He was at her funeral after she died. And they had one child, Tamar, who became Tamar Hennessy, and her granddaughters are very involved in the Catholic Worker today. Martha right now is getting ready to go to jail for civil disobedience. And Kate Hennessy wrote one of the better books on Dorothy Day. It was the latest book, came out. Dorothy Day, The World Will Be Saved by Beauty. So she's writing, and she has a problem. And that is that this church she has joined did not seem, in her experience, to share this concern that she felt was required by her Christian commitment. And she didn't know what to do about that. She wanted to connect her Catholic faith with her radical social commitment, and she didn't know how to do it. It happened that in 1932, on December 8th, she was sent from New York to cover a protest, unemployment protest in Washington, D.C. And so she went to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which of course was just beginning. She went to the crypt there and she prayed and asked that God would give an answer to her prayer to be able to connect her past social involvement with her present commitment to the Catholic Church. And when she got back home, that was December 8th, 1932, Peter Morin was waiting for her. Peter Morin was a Frenchman who had been a Christian brother in France, eventually left, came to the United States, basically was a laborer, but he had taught as a Christian brother in France, and so he kept up his intellectual enterprises by himself. He was an autodidact. He taught himself. And he kept looking around and kept preaching to people on the street. He believed in being worker scholars, but he wanted to get his message about Catholic social teaching out there. And he was directed to Dorothy Day because he was told that she had this particular kind of interest that he had. And so he was waiting for her. And his message to her was, as he put in the first issue of the Catholic Worker, May 1st, 1933, that the church has to blow the dynamite of its social teaching. And that's what he wanted to do. He said that the church has sealed up its social teaching and is sitting on it. And he wants to blow it out, blow it up, and blow up the world, as it were, and change it. And so they decided to start a newspaper. And of course, as you can see here, Peter Morin's a complex individual. He had voluntary poverty of St. Francis, the charity of St. Vincent de Paul, and the manual labor of St. Benedict. He never owned anything. His only library was his pockets. But they started the Catholic Worker together. And his program, which was eventually accepted by the Catholic Worker, is that there were three basic aspects that he wanted to promote. He wanted people to be able to think clearly and to understand what reality was, which is why the first activity of the Catholic Worker was the newspaper. And all of the Catholic Worker organizations try to have some kind of publication. Some are more elaborate than others. There's the Agitator from Los Angeles. There's the Houston Catholic Worker from Houston. There's the Via Pacis from Des Moines, etc. And then we have our tiny little one here in Alliance called Dynamite. But what happened was, as they were there trying to promote Catholic social teaching, they saw people who were in need. And so Peter Morin wrote a letter to the American bishops saying, look, they used to have the central part of the church in the Middle Ages was a house for the poor. And therefore you should have a house of hospitality in every parish. So they weren't intending to start one themselves. He wanted the church to do what he felt the church should do. And it didn't do it. So they just started it themselves. And that's a key thing about the Catholic Worker. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. And then he had what he called agronomic universities, which he meant people should be able to, there should be communities on the land, because on the land there is no unemployment. And they should, you should have then these three characteristics of a Christian community, which is community. He would put it on the land. Clarification of thought, the message should be clear, and the service should be effective. And so they started the Catholic Worker in New York, and I'll just run a few pictures past you here. You can see the kind of activities that were engaged there. And central to all of their activities was the liturgy. And this is a picture of Father Dan Berrigan celebrating Mass in their dining room. And of course, they very often would have the Liturgy of the Hours. And they had very simple accommodations. The scriptural basis for the Catholic Worker, I want to just mention very briefly, is the reason why the Catholic Worker is called a radical movement. The problem is in our secular culture, radical usually identifies with violent. And Peter Morin said, no, radical means go to the root. In other words, the root of the church is not supposed to be some kind of fulfillment of the laws or orthodoxy, but it's supposed to be compassion. And he would say that that's rooted in the mission of the Christ, which of course is to serve the poor, the blind, the oppressed, the imprisoned, and those suffering injustice. And therefore, if the church is the body of the Christ that's doing that, then the church has to carry that activity out to be the church. It can say it's the church, but if it's not doing those things, it's not the church. And how do you do it? You have to do it in the most extreme way, as if everybody was your family. You have to love your enemies. And then finally, we know that that's the mission of the church, because when we're judged at the end, we're judged according to that mission. And of course, you know about Matthew 25, whatever you've done to the least of my brothers and sisters, you've done to me. So, and that's why Dorothy believed with Vatican II that God has willed that all people should constitute one family, which means the world must change from competition to cooperation. There is no, those are completely opposite attitudes. You do not distribute resources in your family according to the terms of competition, so you shouldn't do that in the world either. The Catholic Worker is not only a radical movement, it's what we would call an anarchist movement. Now, anarchist simply means, it doesn't mean, again, violence. It simply means not letting somebody else, not needing somebody else to tell you what to do, and not going along with them if they tell you you can't do it. In other words, Peter Morin says self-responsibility is the best responsibility. And when I studied in my doctorate almost 50 years ago, I had to read the original of Vatican II in Latin, and I found out that they talked about social action in the context of the church without juridical status. In other words, they introduced into the theology of the church the fact that the church is truly the church, even if it's not within juridical boundaries. It's truly the church if it's doing Christ's work. And so that category of movement is equal to the category of institution when it comes to talking about the church, the organized church. And it's really based on Matthew 18:20 that says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in their midst. And so Jesus is there when people are living out his life. And so therefore, that's why the Catholic Worker has no fixed organizational structure. It only continues to exist because it's allowing people to be Christian, but it has no administrative system. But it does fulfill the major characteristics or aspects of the church mission. As you saw there, the whole idea of the agronomic universities is the community, which then has a message. In other words, okay, we are a community to show the kingdom of God. This message explains what those requirements are for the kingdom of God at this time, and we will try to fulfill that in service in the world. And all of that is supported by spirituality. Now, in contrast to the experience of many people, spirituality, liturgy is not the purpose of the church, but it's the center. It's the center. It's necessary for the church to carry out its mission in the same way that a team meeting is the center, is central to team carrying out its task, but its task is carried out on the field. So here are just a few pictures of the Catholic Worker. You can see there, it really was a community. And there's Dorothy there with some seminarians. Dorothy had, of course, many significant contacts, like with Mother Teresa. She felt that the church had to proclaim the message, repent and believe, and be very specific about it and put your life on the line, which she did. And there's A.J. Musty, the pacifist. There's Coretta Scott. There's Scott's King, and there's Cesar Chavez. And then finally, she was her last protest in 1973. She was arrested. And we have this iconic picture of her, just the obstinacy of her Christianity. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is move over to my little experience of the Catholic Worker, and then I'll turn it over to Sister Catherine. Okay. First thing I want to talk about a little bit is, and again, I try to make this brief. My first involvement with the Catholic Worker was in 1975 when I was the director of field education for St. Bernard's Seminary. I knew that there was a Catholic Worker. I had been to see it in Rochester 2 years before, and it had been going on since 1937. But it had been reduced down to one person and a couple of fellows from the street who were the permanent presence. But in 75, I was able to introduce the seminary to the Catholic Worker. And so they, as part of my job as director of field education, and out of that involvement of the seminary came the renewal of the Rochester Catholic Worker. 2 priests were involved there, and it has continued to this day. And the house is the oldest house in the movement. It was established in 1941, and it's still going. What did I do there? Well, I was the barber for 8 years. Every Thursday from 1 to 4, I would cut hair. I helped to start their newsletter on a regular basis. I was involved in a lot of protests. I remember in 1981, they dressed me up as Jonah because I had a beard. And we went through the streets of Rochester with a sign, "Repent of Reaganomics." And then I also led the Stations of the Cross throughout the city on Good Friday for 2 or 3 years. And then I helped to start a little community where we had liturgy every week. Our kids are sort of raised there. But then the seminary closed and I had to leave and go to Walsh. And there was no Catholic worker in the area. I missed that. I was able to support Sister Catherine in Akron when they started the Akron Catholic Worker. I was able to direct a student of mine from Walsh to the Catholic Worker, and he's still with the Cleveland Catholic Worker, and he joined the Catholic Worker in 2002, but he's still there with Cleveland. But it wasn't until 2010 that the possibility of maybe having a Catholic worker in our area was brought up. And that's because Bishop John Michael Botin, the Romanian Byzantine bishop, had to close the little church in Alliance. And you can put it on now. And he had a little building that he wanted to make available as a Catholic worker house. And he asked me to help start it. And so we started a typical Catholic worker, serving food, all volunteers. And then, of course, and the people who actually were there in place were people who first started to eat there, because we were just volunteers. We had full-time jobs. We didn't have any staff. And so this is one woman who comes every day and helps to oversee the house. And then we have another fellow, I have a picture, who takes care of the house, does all the physical things. Okay. But then, of course, COVID hit. And so we went, instead of the dining room that you saw there, we had to do takeout. But one advantage of not using the dining room is that we were then available. We could possibly remodel the building because it was 146 years old. And so volunteers from a particular parish took a work week and they came in and they replaced a lot of things, especially our floor, which we needed to have replaced. You can see there's a lot of work that was being done. And then the fellow who comes in every day and oversees all the physical work is on our new floor. His name is Howard. So Carol and Howard are the two sort of full-time staff, as it were.
they're just from the neighborhood.
They're just from the neighborhood, of course. Those of us who know about the Catholic worker, we sort of oversee the identity of it, but they do the work. And now, of course, we don't have the dining room. We have you saw that. We have the takeouts, but we have a little living room for the future. And we give things away, but we have to put them outside. And we have on our fence the basic beliefs of the house. You may have seen this poster. In this house, we believe that everything matters. No human is illegal. Science is real, etc. Okay, that's my quick summary. And so I'll turn it over to Sister Catherine for her experience of Akron.
My presentation is really not very much because, it's not very elaborate because I can't leave my room for one thing. And so I have my phone and that's about it. 25 years ago or more, I came to Akron to work at St. Bernard's with the Hispanic community. And during the time I was there, I was asked a question by a man by the name of Patrick Murray and his wife, Mary. What are you going to do now that you're back from El Salvador? And I said, well, I'm working here with the Hispanics. And he said, well, yes, but what else? And for the first time in my life, I heard myself say, I'd like to start a Catholic worker. Well, he being a Catholic worker most of his life, it was like, oh, wow, that's great. Now here are some more people. So very soon we had about 5 people that were interested. And from there, we started to bring people together and say, okay, if we're thinking about us starting a Catholic worker in Akron, would this community support us? And so we met with different people and we were assured that the community would support us. And yes, they have, very much so. And why was I drawn to the Catholic worker? I had read The Long Loneliness. That was, I didn't know a whole lot, but I had read The Long Loneliness. And The Long Loneliness and the way in which Dorothy Day had, thank you, had gone about doing ministry really spoke to me. I'm a Sister of Charity of St. Augustine, and we have been, our charism is to meet the unmet needs. And so, we have been traditionally and historically in very different kind of ministries, including healthcare and social service and, care of orphans and all of that. What also attracted me very much is the inclusivity, the inclusion. And the more I read and hear Pope Francis, that's part of what he does is the inclusion. We must and are called to inclusivity. The other part is that it's organic. So being organic is like a living organism. And because it is a living organism, it can change and does change and will change and always seems to be in change, not radical change, but like the change that's necessary to meet the needs of the people who are asking for help and and their needs are not met. And as Joe mentioned, it's radical and it's anarchist. Now, I didn't understand the whole meaning of anarchist, for a while, but being radical really is rooted in the mission of Christ. And that also appealed very much to me. We went out and also that because it's adaptable to the need, but also it's small. We have kept our mission smaller so that it is easier to accommodate and it's easier also to adapt to our guests and to our volunteers and to our neighborhood. So when we first started, we had about 5 people, and actually we had a dream and we didn't have a penny, which I think is if 4 or 5 comes together or more and say, we have a dream about this, I think that comes long before looking for money. And we were able to find a house in a neighborhood that definitely is a poorer neighborhood, a rather mixed neighborhood, and even got more mixed as we moved in. At first, we were very suspect when we moved in because almost everybody in the neighborhood was wanting to move out. And this group of white folks moved in and took over a house. It took us a while to convince the neighbors that who we were and what we were all about. But we didn't go out preaching. What we did was just try to be good neighbors. So we also took as one of our missions is to be good neighbors in our neighborhood and as a neighbor. And also we called upon our neighbors for help when we needed, and we got it. So we wanted to have a place that's simple and humble and small and gospel centered. And our presence really has changed the neighborhood. And it's still a poor neighborhood, but it has changed the neighborhood in the sense of how neighbors treat each other. We very much have focused on the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. And we have very much focused on spirituality, that we are grounded in the spirituality of the gospel, spirituality of service, and the spirituality of being inclusive, and also the spirituality of enjoying what we're doing. I think that I have never enjoyed anything as much as I have as being a Catholic worker. I did enjoy being everything I've done, and in El Salvador, but especially in the Catholic worker. We wanted to see the world from the vantage point of those on the margins. So being on the margin for us was important, and to see the world from that point of view changed all of us. So I think the change that came about actually is in the volunteers and in the people who have come. We wanted also to have an opportunity for anybody who would say, I want to help. That they don't have to be, they don't have to measure up. They can come and they can help, and they can do their part and be part of the community. So that's also and has continued to be an important part for us. Joe has helped us in the area of spirituality too, helping us through the spiritual corpus works of mercy, the social doctrine of the church, and prayer. But we have kept that as a central part for us. Also, if you want to go to our website, we do have a new website, it's Catholic Worker Akron, and there is some information. It's a rather simple website, but it's new. We got a new person, Sister Juliana, who is going to be the director is the director now of the Catholic Worker, and she's living in with our guests. We have 3 houses. One house is the family that has been Catholic worker with us, and the other 2 has been filled with guests. Now we didn't start out to be just for the Hispanic community. We first got Hispanics that were sent to us actually from Houston after a disaster, many disasters that has happened in Central America. And they came north, and at that time they were allowed in, and some of them have become citizens. And the Houston Catholic worker was just totally overflown, and called around to see if we could take anybody. So eventually, we got the first 4 people that came from Honduras, 4 women, and they have done well. In fact, and the daughter of one of those women bought a house 2 doors away from us, so we have them back in our neighborhood again. And that's how then they begin to spread the word, so to speak. People always ask me, how do people know about Catholic worker? And I said, they know because of the Underground Railroad, the underground information. There's a whole information flow that it's not our newspaper, our radios or television. So we always had people knocking at our door. And then as the Hispanics came, there was more and more Hispanic. We have worked in all the areas of Hispanic need when they come. They came from Chiapas and they came from Central America. And the people who came, especially from Chiapas, had nobody ahead of them. Like many immigrants will come, like I did, had my aunt here that I could come to, and with my sister, but they didn't have anybody. So one of the things that I said when I left El Salvador is, when I go north, I'll be there to meet you. So that's pretty much what I have done, is to be there for them when they come. And they're still coming, although it's harder and harder and harder and harder for them to come. Two other things I think that I'd like to mention is that before I made commitment to the Catholic worker, I was very involved in the training of nonviolence and active nonviolence. So before I went to El Salvador, I had, as best I could, done quite a lot of work on how am I going to be in a civil war. And it had really the spirituality and the vow of nonviolence, and the going into to that situation was having trained myself and in active nonviolence and practicing it as best I could was really a gift for me. But it's also a gift that I brought back with me even stronger, so that being in the neighborhood still is pretty violent and have a good bit of violence in it, that it has been really a spiritual gift for me and a strength. And we trained others also in active nonviolence. That was part of what we tried to do. We started a center called Peter Moran Center. We wanted to have a drop-in center, a place where people can come and sit down and talk to each other, and also a place to eat. So we were able to find a place, and we called it Peter Moran Center. And that is, in fact, it's on the front page of the paper today, about how are they trying to respond to the pandemic in a time when winter is upon us, and what they're doing. So from the Peter Moran Center, then, as soon as it was able to function, went on its own, because we still believed that keeping small was the better way to go, and it gave them the opportunity also to develop and to grow and to flourish. Well, they have, and they have many ministries to people on the street, as well as the ministry in-house with meals, taken people in during the very cold nights, sleeping on the floor on mats, all kinds of ways in which they have outreach to the homeless, as well as what they do in-house, which is also clothing and food and take-home food, as well as meals, and a place to sit and read, which is curbed right now also. I would say that anybody who has been with the Catholic worker, including Peter Moran Center, is the revolution of the heart has taken place in each person that has been active. And maybe they won't say that, but that is really what has happened. So the revolution of the heart comes because of being with the people on the margins and the people who are poor. And I think they have brought more to us than we have given to them. A couple of other things. I'm talking really here about, Joe put the net way out there, and I'm bringing it a little closer and just talking about, what has happened in this particular Catholic worker and my experience there. I would say it is radical. We try to be and inclusive, but we don't do it perfectly, and neither did Dorothy Day do it perfectly. But every day we try to do it a little bit more perfect, I guess. Now, the other thing is saying about the revolution of the heart is that, again, go back to a strong spirituality centered on the gospel and see the world differently. Be able to see the world differently through the eyes of Jesus and through the eyes of the gospel. So that's the vantage point that I think is such a blessing to us. I think I should stop so that people can ask questions.
Well, thank you, Sister Catherine and Joe, both of you for your wonderful remarks and your particularly sharing how the revolution of the heart, how you are living it.
Mhm.
There's about 50 of us, brothers and sisters. So if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, just unmute yourself and then identify who you are and then say what you'd like to say. So the floor is now open for comments or questions. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, I think what they were saying, both speakers were saying, Pope Francis in the encyclical Fratelli Tutti mentions the flavor of the gospel right off in the very beginning. And I think they have, Catholic Worker certainly does that, brings to the fore the flavor of the gospel.
Mhm.
Great metaphor. Thank you. I cannot see all of you, so just speak up. George?
I'd say with Jim that they not only have the flavor of the gospel, but they've added a lot of spice to it, which makes it even more palatable.
Well said. One of the things that struck me, Joe and Catherine, both of you, is, Joe, when you said that, excuse me, when Peter Morin, his original idea was that every parish, the whole church should be a Catholic worker movement, but that the church as a whole obviously was not up to that. And obviously it's still not quite up to that. So I just want to really celebrate and affirm that the hundreds of Catholic worker houses just here in the United States are living out that commitment. And the more places and the more parishes that can do that, the more we can see that revolution of the heart continue. Yes, Edward.
Yeah, I was amazed that when I worked on the Lower East Side near the Catholic Worker Movement, we used to go there for the lectures and things. But the one who got us all involved in housing street people was Mayor Koch, our Jewish mayor, not our Catholic bishops. And we took in, people every night. We got people from the neighborhood to host them, like invited guests and signing a book and caring for them. It was a great moment of transformation for the parishioners when we could finally host homeless people, at least in the evening. Thanks to Mayor Koch.
Truly
I would-
interfaith. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'd like to respond and to something. Well, one of the ideas of Peter Morin, and it does happen on occasions at least, is to have a Christ room. Every family to have a Christ room, and every parish to have a Christ room. And that Christ room is to be offered then to the person in need. Now, at one time when we had a request for a mom and her son to come to us, there we didn't have space. I mean, we really, really didn't have space. And the neighbor, one of our Catholic workers that was actually doing tutoring for us, she said, "I have space." So they took her and the son until we got a place. And then this young man and the mom stayed with us and eventually graduated from university. He's one of the dreamers. So we keep still praying that he will get a path to citizenship. It's a very, very, very difficult to work with immigrants right now because there is no path to citizenship. So one of the activities, if you at all get involved, is to really push for path to citizenship for people who are here for many, many years, have gone to school here, and and still are outsiders. They have no path to citizenship. So that's definitely something that can be worked on. And we have done a lot of work at the Catholic Worker in the area of getting people that, in the beginning especially, that had any, we trained ourselves in immigration law as much as we, what we needed to know in order to work on path to citizenship to the people that we could. And as a result, really have people that are now our citizens. And still today, with lawyers, with courts, which is one of the most difficult things I have done. And I think anybody else will either, because there is so few results, positive results on what we do. And one of the other things we were able to do because of our involvement was get a couple of children out of being in camp when they crossed the border as minors and got them to their families. So that was like one big celebration we had because we were successful in doing it. And also able to reunite a family, although they weren't in camp, they got separated and eventually was able to reunite that family, and they're all in Akron right now. They kept reuniting once they started, and they ended up with 9 or 10, as usually a lot of them do, because they're, they live together in order for them to be able to pay the rent.
Thank you. Yes, Frank.
In 1968, I was studying in Rome, lived at a place we call La Casa, and we were able to spend an evening with Dorothy Day. And I'd just like to take a couple of seconds to say what that was like.
At 5:20.
Imagine that you had an old lady who lived next door to you, and she was your neighbor. And she came over to share a cup of tea with you. Well, at the Casa, we had this second floor room we called the upper room. And Dorothy came to be with us, and she was just like that neighbor. Utter simplicity, utter humility. There's no way you would think of her as one of the most well-known people in the Catholic world. And I don't remember a word of what we talked about. But what I remember is that she just came across as this person so totally committed to those principles that she believed in. And in listening to Sister Catherine and Father Tony, I see that commitment, it just carries on from what she started. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience to be with her, that one you never forget.
Yes, Tom.
Being involved with a effort to canonize a person from Denver, I wonder what the canonization process with Dorothy Day looks like, and what stage is it, who's doing what, and do we have any information on that?
Joe, do you know anything about that, or Sister Catherine? The stages in the process of canonization?
Well, I don't know a lot of detail, but I know I have some general information because I've gone to conferences where they were talking about that. It seems that, at least in this case, I don't know about other cases of canonization, especially if there's martyrdom in it, but in her case, they say they have to spend up to, and she would hate this, up to $1 million to examine all of her life, examine all of her writings, have interviews with hundreds of people who interacted with her to get some kind of approval of her. And I think that's why you maybe remember, she said, "Don't call me a saint. I don't want to be dismissed that easily." But it is moving along. If you want to get more detail, all you have to do is Google Dorothy Day Guild. The Dorothy Day Guild is basically fronting for her canonization.
Thank you.
Also, it's you can become a member, and the more members they have, the better. And it really isn't really costly. but they sent out a wonderful magazine. It was on spirituality, and it is really a wonderful little magazine from the guild itself. Okay, and the people that are working on it are remarkable people and a lot of work to do. They have progressed a lot. They have collected the materials and translated it. And they have been able to get volunteers to do that.
Okay. I'm also aware of the recent efforts to canonize Carlos de Foucault. And I know that that kind of money was not spent. And they do mention him as a potential canonization even in the next few months. So there might be exceptions to what we hear too. Thank you.
But her wish was not to be canonized. Don't dismiss me that easily. And I think maybe that needs to be honored.
Interesting comment, Marianne.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comment and it's made often. And the other comment is that the world is in need of, she's a woman, a saint for our times.
Yeah.
And a saint for our times, and even more and more and more so a saint for our times. And promoting the promotion of a saint and the canonization of saint does bring it to world attention. And that's, it's like, I don't know if it's honoring her or if it's saying the spirituality of the Catholic worker and her way of going about living the spiritual and corporal works of mercy and living the gospel is for our times.
Yeah, and I'm going to respect her wishes as well, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to limit her image and her work to us who happen to be contemporaries of Dorothy Day. It should be going on for centuries afterwards, I hope.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment relative to that because of another person who should have been canonized and wasn't, but he was clearly considered a saint by millions of people, and that's Oscar Romero.
I think that will be,
he is canonized. He's canonized now.
Yeah.
What had happened, of course, the point I guess is that the bishops blocked his cause, and the people, if you've been to El Salvador, his face is everywhere, and it's called San Romero.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, thank you.
The official canonization is not necessary to be a saint. Now, of course, the Pope, knowing that he had been blocked, as soon as he became Pope, released that blockage and canonized him.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Hello, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, I'm a Catholic worker here in Green Bay Diocese, and I'm also a member of the National Dorothy Day a Saint Committee, which put a lot of pressure on New York to get the cause going several years ago. So right now, as I think you know, all of the archives are at Marquette University here in Wisconsin. Phil Runkle, archivist, we were there a couple of months ago, and all that work of examining and reading all of her papers by the theologians, that has all been done. So I don't know how much it cost, but now the big thing we're working on now is to get a miracle. She's the last person in the world who would say, yeah, I should be made a saint, but we have to get her story out there. And that's our motivation behind our group that's working out of New York to organize and get the canonization process going. But I'm very proud to say that we lit a fire under Cardinal Dolan and the New York people, and they because it needs money and support. That the case was started by Cardinal O'Connor because that was her domicile in Staten Island in New York, and so that's the diocese in charge of administering the process. But right now, we're looking for a miracle.
Yeah, well, New York has jurisdiction, yeah.
Well, I want to respect also our time. I'm just really pleased and very grateful to you, Joe, and to you, Sister Catherine. Sister Catherine, you are a heroine in many ways because you're not only gave us a great presentation, and as you say, Joe gave us the kind of large picture, and you gave us the up close and personal version. And you're not feeling well. You have COVID.
Yes, getting better, but I have COVID, yes. Mhm.
Well, we're going to be praying for you and all the other
Thank you.
people we know, so many of the people that we love and care for, and those that we don't know who are suffering from this pandemic. So thank you to both of you for making this such a wonderful webinar. And Bob, is there any announcements that you have at all? You have to unmute. Bob, you have to unmute.
Everybody else is off mute now.
Bob, you're mute. There you go.
Yes, we just got a new person joining us too, or maybe rejoining us. Well, I'm very grateful for this. I think this was very informative for me. I've been aware of Dorothy Day and had different connections, but this really got me much more deeply in touch with her. I think the Gospel Nonviolence Committee that John is heading up has a number of other webinars on the books, and maybe you could mention those, John, and just make sure people are aware of those so they can go to our website and register for them.
Yes, by all means. We have the next one coming up will be on December 2nd, which is the exact 40th anniversary of the 4 women martyrs in El Salvador. And,
Oh, good.
and I'm sure that Catherine and other people know them. And then the next one after that will be in January 13th. Chuck Dom, who's a Dominican priest in Chicago, will give a presentation on When I Cry for Help. That's the title, and the subtitle will be Responding to Domestic Violence in Our Parish Communities. That's shifting violence from the wide perspective of the international and national scene down into our own family lives, and where there is, as you know, significant violence and significant oppression. And then in March coming up, March 24th, we will have a webinar on Oscar Romero, who was mentioned tonight. So those are upcoming. Keep your eyes open and we'll keep you informed. Thanks so much for being with us. And Bob, thank you for helping us put this on. Bye-bye to all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope you
Bye-bye.
get well, Sister Catherine, real soon.
Thank you. I will.